Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us.
Yeah, always a pleasure.
Today we're going to be looking at something that might seem really, really basic on the surface.
Okay.
The equation 1 plus 1 equals 2.
All right, simple math.
Right. But we found this fascinating excerpt from a podcast called Deep Thoughts and Overanalyzed.
Okay.
And they actually dove into this idea of whether 1 plus 1 always equals 2 and what that might mean.
Hmm. That's interesting. I mean, it seems so straightforward, right? 1 plus 1 equals 2 is like one of the first things we learn.
Yeah, for sure. And they start with that, just acknowledging that in basic math, 1 plus 1 equals 2. It's, bedrock principle.
Yeah, the foundation of arithmetic.
But then they bring in this idea of quantum mechanics.
Oh, quantum mechanics, always a good time to shake things up.
Right. And so they were talking about how, a single particle can exist in multiple states simultaneously in the quantum world. So, it could be both a 1 and a 0 at the same time.
Right, the whole idea of superposition.
Exactly. And so they were kind of positing, well, if 1 itself is kind of blurry and undefined in the quantum world, what does that mean for 1 plus 1?
Yeah, does it still equal 2, or could it be a whole range of possibilities existing at once?
And that's what they're getting at.
Yeah.
And they even brought up the example of binary code.
Oh, right, where 1 plus 1 equals 10.
Exactly. So it really makes you think about how the system we use to represent information can change the outcome.
Right. It's not that 1 plus 1 actually equals a different number. It's more like the same idea can be expressed in different ways depending on the system you're using.
And then they took it even a step further and they started talking about how even simple math can be influenced by cultural interpretation.
Oh, wow. Okay, I'm curious how they got there.
So, for example, they use the plus sign.
Oh, the plus sign.
And they suggest that instead of just thinking about it as adding quantities, numerically, it could also be seen as like a symbol for an intersection or a merging of ideas.
Oh, so 1 plus 1 could represent like a blending of different perspectives or truths.
Exactly. Yeah. And I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, that's a powerful way to reframe the equation for sure.
And then to kind of illustrate that further, they use this really cool music analogy.
Okay, I'm all ears. I love a good analogy.
So they argue that if you combine the notes C and E, you don't get the number 2, you get a C major chord, which is something totally new and different.
Yeah, that's a great example of synergy.
Right. And they talk about how synergy is when two things come together to create something greater than just the sum of their parts.
Like individual musical notes coming together to form a beautiful chord.
Exactly. And they point out that we see this all the time in real life, in relationships and collaborations and scientific discoveries.
Absolutely. Like the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
And then they get into these really fun real-world examples to kind of drive this point home.
Okay, like what?
So one example they use is if you go to a diner and you order one pancake and then another pancake.
Yeah.
Do you have 2 pancakes or do you have a stack?
I see what they're getting at. It's like technically you have 2 individual pancakes,
Yeah.
but the way they're presented as a stack creates something more.
Yeah, it's like they transcend their individual oneness.
Yeah, I like it.
And then they even apply this kind of thinking to relationships.
Okay, so how does 1 plus 1 work in the context of a relationship?
Well, they propose that one partner plus one partner doesn't always just equal 2.
Right, because there's so much more to it than that.
Right, you have emotions and shared experiences and all these complexities that you can't capture in a simple equation.
It's like 1 plus 1 might equal we in a relationship, which represents this whole other level of connection and unity.
But then that raises the question, does this mean basic math is wrong? Like, is 1 plus 1 not really 2?
That's a great point. And I
Okay.
think the key here is that it's not about saying basic math is wrong. 1 plus 1 still equals 2 in its most basic mathematical sense.
Right.
But what this podcast is doing is suggesting that maybe this simple equation can also serve as a metaphor for something much more nuanced.
So it's like 1 plus 1 equals 2 can be both correct in a mathematical sense and also incomplete in capturing the full depth of meaning.
Exactly. And I think that's a really important point. It's a reminder that even the simplest things can have hidden layers of meaning.
It encourages us to kind of look beyond the surface level of things.
For sure.
Yeah.
And that's what makes these deep dives so fascinating.
Totally. And their exploration of this, 1 plus 1 idea really makes you wonder what other simple truths we might be taking for granted.
Absolutely. What other seemingly straightforward concepts in our lives might actually have hidden depths and complexities that we haven't even considered?
It's definitely something to think about. And it actually leads perfectly into the next part of our deep dive.
Oh, perfect. I can't wait.
So let's take a quick break and then we'll jump right back into it.
Yeah, it really is amazing how we just like accept certain things as absolutely true without even thinking about it.
It's wild. Like 1 + 1 = 2, you don't even question it.
Right. And this podcast episode is making us question it.
Yeah, exactly. And they go on to talk about black holes.
Black holes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which are like these incredibly dense regions in space where gravity is so strong that nothing can escape.
Yeah, I mean, talk about mind-blowing stuff.
Totally. And so they ask, does the concept of one even hold up inside a black hole? Like if you were to add 1 + 1 in that kind of environment, would it still result in 2?
Whoa. I mean, do our laws of math even work in a place where space and time are like completely warped?
It's almost like asking, what happens to math when you throw it into a cosmic blender.
Right.
And the podcast hosts, they actually joke about, 1 + 1 equaling like cosmic taffy inside a black hole.
Cosmic tap. I love it.
Yeah.
It's like the ultimate unknown.
Right. And it really highlights how much we still don't know.
For sure. But that's what makes exploring these topics so exciting.
Absolutely. So even though we may not have a definitive answer about, what 1 + 1 equals inside a black hole,
Yeah.
this whole deep dive has really opened up a whole new perspective on this seemingly simple equation.
Yeah, it's not really about finding the right answer, It's more about embracing the ambiguity and recognizing that even straightforward concepts can have multiple interpretations.
That's a really good point. It's about being open to different perspectives and challenging our assumptions.
Exactly. And it's about appreciating the beauty of paradoxes. The idea that 1 + 1 can be both correct and incomplete at the same time is just fascinating.
It's like one of those Zen koans.
Yeah.
It's a riddle that makes you think outside the box.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the main takeaway here is the importance of staying curious and open-minded.
Absolutely. We should never stop questioning and exploring and looking for new perspectives.
It's all about having that childlike sense of wonder and approaching even the most familiar things with fresh eyes.
And I think this Deep Thoughts podcast does a really good job at that.
Mm-hmm.
They take these simple ideas and make you think about them in totally new ways.
Yeah, it's about finding the extraordinary in the ordinary and realizing that there's always more to discover, even in the things we think we know best.
So well said. And that's what being a lifelong learner is all about, right?
Absolutely. It's about nurturing that curiosity and never losing that thirst for knowledge.
This deep dive has been so thought-provoking. We've gone from quantum mechanics to black holes to, like, the very nature of knowledge itself.
It's been quite a journey.
And I don't think I'll ever look at a simple addition problem the same way again.
Me neither.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up, I think there's one final thought we should leave our listeners with.
It really makes you think, if something as basic as 1 + 1 can lead to all these, like, really deep questions,
Oh, yeah.
then, like, what other simple truths are out there that we just, like, haven't even thought to question?
Totally. It's like we've been trained to accept certain things as just, like, the absolute truth.
Yeah. Yeah, we get so caught up in, like, the everyday stuff that we forget to actually look at things with fresh eyes.
Exactly. And that's where the real joy of learning is. Like rediscovering that kind of childlike curiosity.
Absolutely. And maybe the next time you see something that seems like totally simple and self-evident, just take a second and be like, wait, is there more to this?
Oh, yeah. Totally embrace that inner skeptic.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to dig a little deeper.
You might be surprised what you find.
For sure.
Well, this has been like a really eye-opening deep dive. I feel like we've only scratched the surface of what 1 + 1 can teach us.
Yeah. It's amazing how much there is to uncover when you start to really question things.
Absolutely. So I want to thank everyone for listening and joining us on this like little journey of intellectual exploration.
Always a pleasure.
And a huge thank you to you for sharing your insights and expertise.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's always fun to like delve into these topics and encourage people to think critically.
And to all our listeners out there, stay curious, keep exploring, and never stop questioning the world around you.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Until next time, happy deep diving.